Hey guys, just wanted to jump on here really quick. I've had a lot of people reach out to me in terms of how they can support what I'm doing. I am doing this full time now, and if you'd like to contribute, if you like and value the work that I'm doing and like to contribute, on every single episode, I have a title "Support My Work." Underneath it, there's a Venmo, Locals, Cash App, or if you prefer not to use one of those methods, you can mail a check or money order to PO Box 25383, Scottsdale, Arizona 85255 9998. So, again, thank you for all the support. Appreciate it and look forward to more conversations ahead. Dr. Makis, thank you. Thanks for coming back on. It was great to meet you in person a few weeks back in Phoenix, and got to hear you speak with Kevin McKernan and Dr. Brian Hooker, Dr. Peter McCullough, and I'm always I'm appreciative of the fact that I get to come to these events and hear people like yourself talk. So thank you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. No, it was an amazing event that Children's Health Defense put on in Arizona, and Kevin McKernan had some really breaking news about the vaccine contamination and new things that he found. He had sampled actually I believe it was a colon cancer sample from a patient who'd had four Pfizer mRNA vaccines, and he had found some new things in there that apparently either Pfizer hadn't disclosed or sort of a new type of plasmid that had some sort of scary features that we keep getting closer and closer to proving that these shots can cause cancer, can cause turbo cancers, and that these cancers are really, really aggressive.
Well, and he's hitting a target because he went on Danny Jones's show on YouTube and they pulled it.
Yeah, no, I mean the censorship is still, it's still rampant. I think people don't realize how bad the censorship still is. Zuckerberg just visited President Trump at Mar-a-Lago, right? And I'm not sure what they discussed, or I think the rumor was that he was talking about bringing freedom back to Facebook, that we could actually post. I still can't post on Facebook without getting either banned or a warning. I haven't been able to post on YouTube in 4 years. Any of my material, my interviews that get posted on YouTube usually get pulled as well.
Do you know how long they stay up on YouTube before they get yanked?
Um, I think some of them get yanked very, very quickly. Probably within hours, maybe even minutes in some cases.
Because I'm even contemplating putting our conversation up, and I'm like, I wonder
Good
if it'll.
luck.
I wonder. Well, I part of me wants to. So here's what's funny. I've been posting all my videos to Rumble for I think 2.5 years now,
Yeah,
and I never wanted to invest in YouTube because of this situation. I'm like, okay, if I start on X like promoting our conversation on YouTube and you reshare it, and but then all of a sudden they can just cancel me and just turn off my channel.
right.
But recently I started putting on YouTube because the reality of it is they're the juggernaut. Everybody goes on YouTube for everything. And I'm like, okay, what the hell? I got nothing to lose. I'll just put stuff up there. And I don't plan on monetizing YouTube at all. I monetize Rumble. But if anything, I can pick up, get a bigger audience.
Sure.
I'm not kidding you, doctor. I had second conversation within a couple hours. They pulled the episode.
It's still happening. Honestly, it's one platform that I've really haven't even tried putting material on, or like I said, investing in building a presence on the platform. Because if they can, pull your material like this, and in some cases, pull it so quickly. Uh, for example, talking about cancer and cutting edge cancer treatments, I haven't really had the courage to even put those videos out there, right? Because if you mention the COVID vaccine once, well, I don't know if the algorithm is looking for that. And regardless if, 99% of the videos about cancer or treating cancer or diagnosing cancer, if they're targeting certain keywords, for example, then you almost have no chance.
Yeah, so they have a software that can literally listen to our conversation and hear those keywords. Is it that sophisticated? I don't
I
understand how it
believe
works.
I believe so, unless they have a huge team of people that that sits down and listen to these. But it's honestly sometimes I think things get pulled in minutes. So they must have some algorithm that looks for certain keywords probably.
Well, and mine was classified as medical misinformation, but the people that I had on, I don't remember us talking about anything in terms of medical that they would classify as medical misinformation. And then it was, you can do an appeal and you hit
Right.
send. You can't put any notes or anything.
Right.
And it within 5 minutes, maybe even less, my appeal got denied. But it was my first warning, so that comes off at the end of February. So if I get another one, I get a strike, and then I can't post for a week.
It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable that this is still going on. But I guess we forget because X is such a huge platform now. And of course, Elon Musk tries to get people to post their entire content on X, to upload their videos and podcasts and so on. One thing I still don't like about X is sort of the shadow banning effect that still happens when you post outside links. So, for example, I still can't link to my Substack articles because if I put a link to my Substack article, I know that I will get shadow banned by at least 95% and it won't be seen by anybody almost.
Yeah, I've heard that too. So what do? You put your post and then underneath it a comment with the link to the Substack article?
What I've been doing is I put a snapshot of the first page of my Substack article, which has the URL, and I basically say, look, if you want to go to the article, type the URL out, which for a lot of people that's annoying to do. That's an extra step. And I just avoid the link altogether. Some people say that you could maybe put the link in the comments, but I've seen shadow banning that way as well. So it's this battle that Elon Musk has had with Substack, and apparently Substack tried to steal something and or copy something from X, and there's been sort of a battle ever since. But I've been posting the URLs, and I've been doing that for over a year, and it seems to be working. So it's unfortunate, but that is sort of if there's any negative about X, I'd say that's one negative that I still think should be fixed, or that Elon Musk should maybe do away with.
Well, and it also seems to there's a power struggle going on for the elites, and especially on the tech side. And you have Elon and some others on one. And I don't I'm not buying this whole Zuckerberg thing. To me, I mean, how is it that he's had this moment of clarity when all the damage that he did in 2020, both on the election side and that money he poured in on the election, and then all the canceling and suppressing of ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine. Yeah, I'm not buying that. I hated that Trump met with him, to be honest with you.
Yeah, yeah, same here. I mean, I honestly, I mean, the suppression that happened, people should face prison time for that. People died because information was suppressed. I can tell you, for example, our autopsy paper with Dr. Peter McCullough and Dr. Roger Hodkinson, Mark Trozi, and so on. We had a very large autopsy paper that was suppressed for over a year. It was pulled from Lancet. We had showed with over 300 autopsies in patients that had recently had COVID-19 vaccines that about 74% of the sudden deaths through autopsy results could be attributed to the vaccine. And that paper was suppressed for over a year. The people died because information was suppressed. So I really think people like Mark Zuckerberg should face criminal prosecution and not, be making deals behind the scenes. And it looks like he was trying to make some sort of a deal with President Trump.
Well, and even to take it a step further, he should be stripped of all of his assets for doing this.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree.
Take his net worth and give it to the victims of all of it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's, for example, Facebook went after large Facebook groups of vaccine injured individuals. I remember, many of those groups got shut down, and these were just people who had been injured. These were not anti-vaxxers. These were not people who were, posting misinformation for whatever. They were posting their stories. They were posting their own injuries, and they couldn't do that. They were being censored. They were being shut down. These groups were being shut down. Just absolutely reprehensible. On Instagram, you still have, I think there's a vaccine injury group from Australia that speaks in code. They speak in code through emojis, and you have to use the letter P instead of Pfizer, and you have to refer to vaccines as carrots or pieces of pie, just so that you don't get silenced and shut down. And that's Instagram, for example. It just absolutely was criminal behavior, this censorship that we endured for the last 4 years.
Well, and even, talking about Instagram, taking it a step further, I've had this group on husband wife. They have a nonprofit called VDare, which New York Attorney General Letitia James just successfully shut them down. I couldn't even write the word VDare, DARE. I couldn't write that word on Instagram. And if I did write that word, like the whole post, like say VDare in the description, it's all blank. So the video
Wow.
would go up and completely blank. Now, if I put a space in between V and dare, it's fine. But the word itself will not translate. I
I'm
never saw that before.
That's interesting because I have an Instagram account. I've been posting my died suddenly posts and vaccine injury posts on there, but I can't use the word vaccine. And I haven't. I'd gotten threatened a few times by Instagram. Of course, they pull the post right away and they say, uh, whatever, you violated, their terms and guidelines. And yeah, there's words you absolutely cannot use, or they will take you down, threaten you, and then I don't know how many strikes you get on Instagram before they ban you. But and it's to me, it's incredible that it's still going on. That if it wasn't for X, we probably would have had complete and total censorship on social media across the board. I mean, you've got Rumble, I was on Getter, I was on Parler, I was on Gab, right? But you don't have the same audience. You don't have a fraction of the audience that you have on Twitter, for example. If it wasn't for Twitter, if it wasn't for X and Elon Musk and this almost random, $44 billion purchase that he had made, I mean, we would have complete censorship of social media across the board.
Because Truth Social, I mean, not to take away from people that built it, but that app sucked.
I
It's
struggled to get any kind of traction going on Truth Social, to be honest. So I tried, but it just somehow, I don't know, I wasn't able to really build an audience on Truth Social.
Getter, the same thing. I was on Getter for a while, and that was another one of those. I was like,
It's hard, it's hard because when you've got this reminds me of I call it like the eBay effect. This reminds me when you've got eBay, for example, where you could sell to a global marketplace, and you've got hundreds of millions of users, and you try to go to these other sites where that were trying to compete with eBay and get going, and just none of these sites could get going when you've got such a behemoth there that everybody wants to have an account on eBay. Um, and it was the same kind of effect, I think, with Twitter. Any site that tried to compete with Twitter, like Parler, Getter, Gab, they couldn't get going. They couldn't build a large enough audience. And so when I was banned from Twitter, and I was banned from Twitter for bringing up issues concerning COVID vaccines in children 5 to 11 years old, there was a study that had come out that had showed negative vaccine efficacy. I believe CNBC had actually carried the study, and I reposted something from CNBC, and I was taken down within a few hours. I get a message saying I'm locked out of my account for posting, concerns about vaccinating children, saying that children shouldn't be vaccinated, that the vaccine should be taken off the market. That's all I said. They should be taken off the market now. Children shouldn't be vaccinated. I was locked out of my account within 5 hours, and then I get all these messages saying that I've been terminated and misinformation and so on.
and that was before Elon took it over.
Yeah, of course. That was back in March of 2022. That's when they were really, and I saw a lot of accounts getting killed off at that time because there was a big push to get these vaccines into children. And at that time, the age group was 5 to 11 years old. Of course, now they're pushing them into babies as young as 6 months old. But at the time, it was children 5 to 11 years old. And any account that had brought up concerns about vaccinating children was immediately shut down by Twitter. And I mean, that's a crime because there are about over 500 children in VAERS who have died after taking a Pfizer or Moderna vaccine. And this information was just completely banned. You couldn't talk about it. You couldn't talk about children being harmed by the vaccine. You couldn't talk about children. You couldn't talk about myocarditis. You couldn't talk about, children getting strokes, children getting heart attacks, which has started happening in large numbers. All these child athletes, these high school football players that are dropping dead. It's still happening, but we couldn't talk about it. And of course, forget talking about, children's getting cancer, getting leukemias or sarcomas after taking the COVID-19 vaccines. You couldn't talk about any of that. You were shut down very quickly. And I think there was a really huge push to get these vaccines into children and to shut down any conversation about concerns that any of us had, whether it was doctors or scientists or anybody else. You were shut down almost immediately the moment you brought up vaccinating children.
Yeah, and it got to a point where it was like, who was going to be the last man standing? Because they were just zapping you all. One, I think Dr. McCullough, though, he made it a while, which I was surprised because you would think there'd be a dedicated person.
Yeah, but he started speaking in code.
But
And
you
I
would
think,
just, don't you think, though, they just look at his account? He was on Rogan, like, oh, this guy's got 500,000 followers, zap him.
well, because I think he managed to avoid the algorithm. And I remember watching it, and he started speaking in very, very sort of bizarre ways. And you could tell he was just avoiding sort of making any direct mention of the vaccine and so on. And he said, "Oh, if you take this product or like he was literally speaking in code for a few months, and it worked. And eventually they zapped his account as well. But I think he managed to avoid the algorithm for a few months at least.
He could only dodge and weave for so long.
Exactly.
He ran out of
Well, I think at some
alleyways.
point they just said, "Look, we don't have an excuse to nab him. I think they just took him out just because." I think, and he had amassed a large following, and credit to Dr. Peter McCullough and Dr. Robert Malone. I mean, they
They
got
knocked
on
him
Joe
out early. They
Rogan.
knocked Malone. He got KO'd real early.
They did, and but they came back bigger and stronger than ever. They have very big audiences now, over 1 million followers on Twitter. They've got, massive following on Substack as well. And so, I mean, they've just persevered and pushed through despite, the abuse and the censorship.
Yeah, I was hoping that we were in Overton window right now with YouTube and Facebook being the outcome of the election here in the United States, and with Twitter or with X because, and maybe it's me being naive, but I thought, okay, so trends, people are going to flock more to X because of the ability to share information that maybe these other organizations would follow line. But this is where I get disheartened in the sense of, as long as the technology keeps advancing, they are just going to continue to just tighten the grip on us.
Well, exactly. And again, I don't see why they would loosen up on the attack on the freedom of speech and the censorship. I mean, it's clear that this is being driven by large entities. I mean, all the way to the U.S. government, to the Biden administration that was putting the squeeze on whether the Biden administration was putting squeeze on Facebook, on Zuckerberg, or maybe YouTube. Uh, you've got Tedros, right? The head of the WHO, saying that misinformation is the greatest threat, to mankind, and we have to take a harder stance against misinformation and disinformation, and all these globalist institutions that they're pushing this concept that actually free speech is the most dangerous thing there is right now facing humanity. It isn't new pandemics or anything like that. That it's misinformation. Uh, so I think there's still a push from a lot of these large bodies that want, complete censorship and control. And we've had we've had the election, right? But I mean, Donald Trump is not in yet. He's not in office yet. And so I think I don't see why these other social media platforms would ease up on the censorship, given that this has been their number one priority for years now.
Yeah, well, and that's I've tried to share with people. I mean, my expectations, and people, not everybody, but they think because the election and that Trump won that everything is over and we can just all go back to the couch and he's only one guy and
Yeah.
you cannot just move levers around. It's going to take well beyond his 4-year term, and he only really has 2 years because the House and Senate's going to come back around in the midterm. And what are people's reactions that may not pay as close attention to these things when he can't deliver everything that he, quote unquote, promised on the campaign trail? And some of it is just realistically not possible in such a short amount of time.
Well, it comes back to, this sort of idea of um, the deep state and the swamp and so on, and the entrenched parasitic bureaucratic class. And I think this is really the problem. I think that's what's, sort of strangling the United States and Canada. It's this unelected bureaucratic class. In all these, in the States, it's all these three-letter institutions, right? Whether it's HHS, whether it's FBI, CIA, FDA, CDC, all of these, three-letter institutions are full of bureaucrats that have their own agenda. And it's often a agenda that's aligned with globalist goals and aspirations. We have the same problem in Canada. We have, we have new premiers that come in promising all kinds of things. In Alberta, for example, we have a conservative premier, Alberta Premier Danielle Smith, and she comes in and she apologizes to the unvaccinated, and she says, "You have been the most abused group, the most discriminated group of people I have seen in my lifetime." The next day, she's crucified by the media, and the entire bureaucratic class basically tells her to go to hell. Whether it's the healthcare system that it consumes half the budget, is occupied by leftist bureaucrats who are completely aligned. They're aligned with Justin Trudeau. They're aligned with the WHO, the World Economic Forum. They're pushing the vaccines on babies as young as 6 months old. She makes promises to clean up the healthcare system, but these people stay in charge. No one touches them because the institutions are designed to protect this parasitic bureaucratic class. The police protect them, the RCMP protects them, the courts protect them. You can't fire these people. These bureaucrats that have been sitting in these places in some cases for 20 years, completely unelected, unaccountable to anybody, even unaccountable to the government. And no one dares touch these bureaucrats, right? That's why I think it's been such a shock that when Donald Trump was elected, and now he's talking about putting Robert F. Kennedy Jr. as the head of HHS. You have Professor Bhattacharya appointed, right? Like these are appointments that the parasitic bureaucratic class is like, no, we don't allow people like this to get into positions like this. And so you can see already the massive pushback on the media and so on. So, and Elon Musk talks about flushing this bureaucratic class out, deleting entire departments of these bureaucrats. With the U.S. having, what is it, over 450 federal departments, many of whom no one even knows what they do, or there's no accountability, in these bureaucracies. And I think I think the right approach is you have to delete entire departments uh, to really make any kind of changes. Because these bureaucrats, they just sit there, they keep hiring more of their friends. These departments keep getting bigger and bigger. They consume billions and billions of dollars, and it's almost like a cancer. It's a cancer in the United States, it's a cancer in Canada.
Do you think it's worse in Canada right now than the United States?
I think so. I think so. I think you could see it in the courts. uh, we've had virtually no decisions uh, go in favor of the people during, the COVID-19 pandemic. Virtually no court decisions. All the court decisions supported the vaccine mandates or supported the various abuses that people faced. And the doctors have been viciously persecuted. I know some doctors have been persecuted in the States as well. Dr. Simon Gold faced some prison time because, of alleged involvement in the January 6th event. Dr. Ryan Cole, Dr. Peter McCullough, Dr. Pierre Corey have faced persecution for supporting uh, things like hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin for treating yourself, during a COVID-19 wave or during the pandemic. But I think it's just a degree of magnitude worse in Canada in terms of the corruption in the courts, and just the abuses that people faced.
Yeah, I had said, and I was wrong about 24, what I thought the outcome would be. But after 22, I still feel this way. Again, just the outcome was not what I expected. I thought she would get installed. I did not think they would let President Trump in, because look what they did to get rid of him in 2020. Putting all, with using COVID to change the voting in certain states, and
Yeah.
that didn't change back for 24. I'm still skeptical on all this, doctor. So that's, I could spend an hour talking about that.
No, I understand, and you know what? I actually made a prediction before the election, and I did make a prediction that President Trump would win. Um, I did feel that there was just, I think, so much support out there for him. And Kamala was such an unpopular candidate. I mean, she was unpopular with the Democrats. I
They
mean,
hated her. They
when you
they
look at the
they
she
hated
she had
her.
no success in the primaries. I think she had what, 3% or something like that.
She did. You didn't even. They bypassed the primary this time around
No,
to just install her. No, but I mean, but they had no
yeah,
faith in even her getting through the primary again.
I know. And so, I mean, she was extremely unpopular. So I did feel that President Trump would win, but I suspected that there would be chaos virtually immediately as soon as he was elected, and that the chaos would continue for months on end. I mean, that was my prediction, and we haven't really seen it yet. I feel like there's something bad that's about to happen. I have this almost sense of dread that we're walking towards some kind of really, really bad chaos. Because you're right. I mean, I don't expect the swamp or the deep state to just hand over power, uh, you know, cleanly and simply, or to just go away. These people don't want to give up power. They don't want to go away, right? And so I do expect some chaos heading into, the inauguration.
What do you think that might be?
I keep they keep trying to stir up, a potential pandemic, but it's like they haven't sort of gone all out with it. They keep talking about influenza H5N1, and we even got monkeypox brought back for a couple of weeks at least. We know that influenza H5N1 vaccines have been ordered by the Biden administration. I think there was a $200 million order that was placed this past summer for new mRNA vaccines for this potential outbreak of influenza H5N1, which is supposed to have a fatality rate of anywhere from 30 to 50%. And so they keep kind of bringing that up every now and then. There's of course always the potential of some kind of cyber attack, or really escalating the war in Russia, for example, with the Biden administration giving the okay, to Ukraine to fire U.S. weapons into Russia, right? And so I've been looking at potentially that conflict escalating. So it's hard to tell, but I feel uneasy, to be honest, heading into the inauguration.
Let's look at even the last 5 to 7 days. What's occurred in the world. You've got Russia, Ukraine, right? Where you've got the potential escalation. You got these attack on missiles, and then Russia responds with a new hypersonic. I think that was a week ago, or a little bit less than a week
Right?
ago.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that.
So, so that's going. The Middle East, Iran, that seems to, I mean, Israel Hezbollah has a ceasefire for right now. We'll see how long that lasts, if it even is lasting currently. You have Syria, which has flared up again. South Korea yesterday declares martial law.
Yes, I saw that, and I was trying to figure out what that was all about. Um,
I was exchanging messages with somebody. I put this on X right before we jumped on, and I wrote, this person sent this to me and said, "Democracy suspending democracy to save democracy."
well, apparently the military is upholding the martial law because I believe their parliament voted down, the martial law, and apparently the military said no, we're gonna keep the martial law in place. But I don't know what's driving it. This is a really interesting one that I need to look into.
Well, according to the little bit that I read about it, the president, there was an opposing party that was not going along with what the president wanted, so he declared martial law because of that. But, as of this morning, I don't know what the status is of it, if it was lifted, if it's not lifted, or because the military had gone down to whatever they call it, the parliament or
Right,
whatever, and they blockaded it. But they did a
right,
vote, and they voted to stop it.
right.
But this is all occurring in the last week. And then this morning, the CEO of United Healthcare gets gunned down outside of his hotel in Manhattan.
That's incredible. Yeah, no, I mean, that's the thing is that it's stability is so fragile, right? I mean, it could be gone in an instant. And that's you know that's what has me so concerned is that we could see a financial event of some kind. Like I said, the cyber attacks, get sort of brought up every now and then, and the World Economic Forum has talked about cyber attacks being the next big thing potentially that will make the COVID pandemic look like kindergarten. Uh, so I've always got these concerns in the back of my mind uh, that the sort of the perceived stability we have is actually very, very fragile.
Well, and somebody had said to me, like, you should go to the inauguration. That'd be great. I said, you are out of your mind. Would you go?
Oh, absolutely not.
And you'd have
Absolutely.
access. Let's say you were, if you were appointed or, nominated for something, you might have better access, easier way to get in and get out. Would you still want to go?
I'd be very, very hesitant. Very, very hesitant. Um, Honestly, well, I know, for example, Alberta Premier Danielle Smith has talked about, that she will go to the inauguration, and I'm sure a lot of various high-level politicians and heads of state and so on. But as I said, it's things can get very chaotic. I do not expect the deep state or the swamp to just hand over the reins of power, especially given that you've got this Elon Musk Department of Government Efficiency, right? Where they talk about just deleting entire federal agencies, federal departments. I mean, this is basically taking a hatchet at the deep swamp, at the unelected bureaucrats. We didn't have this in 2000, in 2016. This approach that you'd have these outsiders that would come in and would basically just start slashing entire departments. That was never talked about back in 2016. We've got the example brought up of President Milei in Argentina, where he was doing something similar. He was just slashing the bureaucratic class, and got Argentina back on its feet economically. And apparently, Elon Musk and Vivek are looking at that as an example of success when you take on the swamp in this way, direct way, just slashing entire departments.
Yeah, I'm skeptical of that. I find it ironic that we're trying to get rid of government agencies and we've just created a new one to get rid of them. And then and
But
the whole thing, the whole thing is just so bizarre to me. And then
but
oh god.
no, but I was gonna say, you know what? But you do look at what Elon Musk did at Twitter. right? And he came in, fired 80% of the employees, and fired the management wholesale. And look at Twitter. It's better than ever. And everyone thought it would, collapse and crash. And you've got the leftists are leaving in droves in protest, but it's not affecting Twitter negatively. And I think honestly, I actually do believe that I think Elon Musk is right. I think these bureaucracies, not only are they consuming an unbelievable amount of money, and you've got the debt in the States where it's so big that servicing the debt is now, you pay more interest than the funding that goes to the defense budget of the United States. I mean, that's insane. The fact that more is spent on paying interest than you would pay on keeping up your military, to me is just it shows you that there's a massive problem. And the fact that it's being, and you talked about moving the Overton window. I mean, we've actually moved the Overton window to the point where it's normal and acceptable to be talking about eliminating these giant agencies, these giant bureaucracies. It's in general conversation. This was unthinkable even a few years ago.
I feel like you've seen these superhero memes with these guys, and even they were talking about DOGE, the
Yeah.
department, and it's going to expire, I think, summer of 26 or 28 or something. And I'm like,
Right.
God, it feels like the Dark Knight. Remember the end of the Dark Knight where he had the Christian Bale had the software to be able to track everybody, and then he tells Morgan Freeman enter the code, and it'll just the whole machine will just destroy. I'm like, God, I feel we're not even in a reality anymore because like
It's fascinating because it seems to have come out of nowhere, right? I mean, Elon Musk for a while, I don't know if you remember, but for a while, Elon Musk sort of tried to play it both ways. Try to be on the fence, say, look, I'm not Republican, I'm not Democrat. He was kind of really playing it both ways for a while. And then, of course, he came out fully in support of Trump. But that's a fairly recent thing that it's only been a few months.
and it's like his nephew. Like Thanksgiving, they were at Mar-a-Lago together, and I just looking at this. I'm like, isn't anywhere else to go?
And
Like,
they
I
and
don't
like
know.
and they go like to the UFC fight together,
That
right?
was cool. I thought that was awesome. I thought that
Right?
was like
To
watching them
watch John
walk out.
Jones. And but isn't it fascinating? Like, I mean, you go to a UFC fight with like your best buddies, right? Or you go with your wife or your family, but here they are hanging out with each other at the UFC fight.
And then Speaker Johnson, though, he looked like he wanted to be the small guy that, because, he's much shorter. He looked like he wanted to just fit in with all the tall people like Kid Rock and Elon and Don Jr. and Vivek was there and Tulsi Gabbard.
Yeah, it's fascinating. This is like I always joke with my kids. I say, look, guys, we're living in a simulation, and that's one of the big theories, right? Is that this whole thing is some kind of a simulation, but sometimes it really actually just feels that way. That this is just a fun simulation that's being run, and we're just participants in it.
Does it make you wonder though too? With like say Russia for example, you're like maybe this none of this is happening. Maybe none of this in Syria is occurring right now. I have no way to verify these videos or
No, I know. Well, that's the thing, and I think this sort of nuclear threat with Russia. I think uh, I think a lot of it was overblown. I can't imagine Russia going, nuclear. I think a lot of this is posturing, right? Obviously, I'm sure they're unhappy that Biden gave the green light for Ukraine to start, shooting missiles into Russia or U.S. weapons. I can't imagine sort of a nuclear response from Russia at any point, because just the consequences of that would be so unpredictable and potentially devastating. But that's the thing is that how far is the deep state willing to go to push us into some kind of a war or conflict, right? That's what still has me a bit uneasy, and so whether it's Iran, whether it's Russia, uh, South Korea. What the heck is happening with martial law in South Korea? I mean, that caught me completely off guard. I did not see that coming. Because declaring martial law, I mean, that's a very, very serious thing. So yeah, I'm still feeling uneasy, and I think I'm going to feel uneasy for the next 2, 3 months at least.
Well, and even coming back to the United States, and I do want to shift over to Canada here and talk about what's going on there. But with Robert Kennedy, one, will he get confirmed? And depending on what you read, I've listened to some people. They say they don't think he will. Some others think that he will. But let's say he gets in. Is Big
But
Farm?
what's going on with the recess appointments? Because wasn't there sort of a potential of bypassing this long confirmation process, or are we still going through that? Or
So from what I've gathered from it, I was watching Bill O'Reilly. Not that I'm a big Bill O'Reilly because he was promoting the vaccine, probably still
right?
would to this day. But he was talking about how recess appointments. One, if you do that, it cuts the term from 4 years to two. If you do that, but also he was saying that the Senate will not go on recess till the end of April.
Oh, okay.
So, and again, I don't. I mean, it's only yeah. I only watched his perspective. I didn't verify any of it. So if you have to wait till the end of April, then what do you do? Put an interim person in, and that person has to go through the confirmation. You can't just put an interim
No,
person to
no.
run the department.
See, I don't know. I don't know how the process works.
But let's say Kennedy, if he were to get in, I mean, Big Pharma, would they allow him to just come in and chop it? I mean, if anybody knows about bureaucracies and families getting, killed, it's him.
Yeah, I know.
They're not going to just willingly allow this.
I know. Well, I mean, it's the same thing with with this Department of Government Efficiency, right? With Elon Musk. I mean, how does that is that effective as of January 20th or 21st? I mean, how does this thing come into existence, right? I mean, it's fun to talk about going in and slashing uh, entire departments and entire bureaucracies that have been entrenched in some cases for decades. How do you do that physically? How do you is this going to be like an executive order by President Trump? Is he just going to create this department for Elon Musk by executive order and then just see? I don't know how that's going to manifest in real life.
I'm going to make this prediction right now, even though I'm wrong about everything. I expect Elon will not stick around too long into this administration because he wants to go to Mars.
Fair enough.
And this is all great and everything right now, but like, to your point, you can't just come in and just slash government agencies like this and say, all right, you're done. I don't think it works like a private company.
Well, that's the thing is unless there's something's going to happen that we're not anticipating, or that we just don't that we can't foresee at this time. But you're right. I mean, normally, but that's and again, it comes back to to the same situation in Canada. I've been so frustrated because I've seen, and I go back to healthcare. I've seen people in charge in very powerful positions, whether it's heads of hospitals, whether it's heads of health authorities, public health officials, who have survived multiple new premiers. And the premiers have gone from left to right, back to left, back to right, and the bureaucracy stays completely intact. Virtually no one gets fired. These people who are in these powerful bureaucratic positions, they continue pulling the levers of power. They continue getting money, and they keep getting more and more money every year. That's what blows my mind, is that no one pulls on the money either. No one says, "Look, you guys are not getting anymore, or you guys are going to be slashed by 30%." Nothing. They always give them an extra billion every single year. It's just more money, more money, more money. And I don't know how this gets approved. And the politicians, they all talk a good talk and they all come in saying, we're going to slash bureaucracy and we're going to make things more efficient. We're going to improve healthcare, and they never do anything. The bureaucracy stays the same, and actually it just keeps growing every year. And the politicians end up throwing more money at it every single year. We've had that situation in Canada. I've watched it here in Alberta for the last 10 years. We've had, 4 or 5 different premiers come in, and they haven't touched this cancerous bureaucracy that consumes, well, in our case here, I think they consume about $25 billion every single year. That's a huge amount of money, and that's a drop in the bucket compared to the money that gets consumed in the United States. We're talking hundreds of billions of dollars that get consumed by these bureaucracies, right? And so you're right. I've never seen a politician in the United States or Canada be able to come in and just start deleting entire departments or deleting entire bureaucracies. It just doesn't happen. Yeah, and yet Elon Musk is talking about it. President Trump is talking about it. Um, they do hint that they want to eliminate entire departments, like the Department of Education, for example. I like the concept. Just to change the topic slightly, I love this new concept that that A, they're going to eliminate the Department of Education, and B, they're going to create this American Academy, uh, really to compete with the universities. That's going to have all kinds of degrees available. You could get your degrees online. You have access to whatever you want to learn. You get a degree that's recognized everywhere, and it's free. It's accessible. It's education that's accessible to everyone. And it's really, I think it's to put these universities in direct competition, where, instead of a young person incurring several $100,000 of debt, getting a degree that maybe is going to be useless for them, or maybe, they have this other option to get university education for free, get a degree that's recognized as equal to a degree from any other university, and it's driven by this sort of innovation. Elon Musk is obviously involved in that as well. I love that idea. I love the idea that these universities that have been ripping students off, and putting people in debt, that they're actually going to be facing very stiff competition, potentially, if this gets up and running. So I love that idea, for example, and that doesn't get talked about much, but here's another sort of brand new concept that is being brought in, right? That's going to upend the status quo in education, for example. So I hope that there is a way to come in and delete some of these bureaucracies wholesale. I think some of these bureaucracies are so corrupt and so entrenched. I don't think you can fix them. I don't think you can fix them by firing one or two people and putting new people in charge, and they find out that their hands are tied because there's thousands of people under them that won't do what they want, and they'll do their own thing because they've had their own empire for the last decade or two. I think you need to delete entire departments wholesale, just wipe them out of existence. And I really want to see if President Trump can actually do that somehow.
Well, and that's, also people have to take into account it's taken years to get to this point.
Yeah.
Years. So, if you think that someone's going to come in and in 2 years' time just flip levers and reverse all this, it's not going to work. It doesn't work that way.
Well, that's the thing is there will have to be some new approach that maybe we're not seeing yet. Um, because in the past, again, it was you would fire one or two people at the top. You'd maybe try to install your own person. But again, look at Fauci. He'd been sitting at his position for decades, right? He'd seen presidents come and go, and he was in that position of power for decades. And so I've seen bureaucrats be in these positions for 10, 20 years as the bureaucracy grows around them, and it just keeps getting bigger and bigger. And that's why you cannot fix it by changing one or two people. You have to, some of these bureaucracies have to be eliminated wholesale. I don't know how you do it. I don't know how they'll do it. And I hope it's more than just talk. I hope this whole Elon Musk thing, this eccentric billionaire coming in and just upending the entire political establishment and the way things are done. I hope that's real, and that there's something real behind that, and that we're actually going to get to see it.
What were your thoughts when Trudeau went down to Mar-a-Lago?
I was surprised because it was a bit uncharacteristic of Trudeau to just sort of really almost, and yes, yeah, it almost felt forced. But I was looking at some of the photographs of them together, and Donald Trump just looked. He had a huge smile on his face. I think he was wearing a golden tie, which again, I'm not all that familiar with the symbolism, right? He changes the colors of his ties for certain occasions. So he had this golden tie, huge smile on his face, very, very comfortable with the situation. And then you look at Justin Trudeau, and he's sitting sort of cramped up next to President Trump, and he's very uncomfortable. He's got very sort of defensive body language, and we were trying to figure out what was behind this visit and why he went down to Mar-a-Lago. And I think, the talk right now is that basically President Trump told him about the tariffs and that Canada's going to get punished for with high tariffs and maybe they talked about the border. Who knows? I mean, we're trying to sort of figure out and find out what they talked about. But just from the body language alone, Trudeau looked extremely uncomfortable, and President Trump looked very, very happy and comfortable with the situation.
I love seeing that, to be honest with you. I mean, the election is over, so I'm not celebrating any longer. But I love seeing the people on the left, even people personally that they won't even talk to me now. And part of me, I kind of love it that they're suffering in that regard mentally. And I love seeing Trudeau go down there because what he's done to the people in your country is just beyond sickening.
Yeah, yeah. Honestly, I think he's in the past 10 years, he's damaged Canada. I hope he hasn't damaged it to the point of that, beyond repair. But and it's not just Trudeau. I mean, if people look at Trudeau, obviously he's a globalist, and he talks about Canada being the first post-national state, and he would love to just be the poster child for the World Economic Forum and all their crazy ideas and policies. But it's not just him, it's the entire machine, the government machine behind him. I mean, it's the entire liberal government, uh, that he leads. Extremely corrupt, a lot of money going missing. And we've had a lot of we've had this sort of forced this attempt to force this leftist ideology on Canadians. Uh, we've had hundreds of Christian churches burned down, mysteriously burned down, right? And the excuse that's always given is, well, people are upset about, residential school abuses and First Nations children going missing and all that, and or being found in graves, which has never really been the case. Um, and we've just had the LGBTQ agenda just forced down our throats, forced in schools. You see these giant flags of various kinds. It's not even the rainbow flag anymore. It's all the different varieties of the various flags being, forced on us everywhere. We're forced to go through not a sort of a Pride Day, but a Pride Month. Now they're trying to make it a Pride season. And of course, the abuse of ethical doctors and nurses and healthcare workers, the persecution that people have suffered, the persecution of the truckers, the Canadian truckers, right, still being dragged through courts, still being threatened with imprisonment for years. Canada's just suffered in so many ways. And I think he's done a lot of damage, a lot of damage. To
So
the point where now, I mean, have you seen the recent talk about, Canada becoming the 51st state and this whole sort of joke that's going around? I think President Trump posted a picture of himself next to a big, Canadian flag and joking around that if Canada can't survive, without sort of screwing over the United States in various ways, that maybe they should become the 51st state, and that Trudeau will make that Trump will make Trudeau the governor of the 51st state.
I saw that. What is Premier Danielle Smith then? How is she coming after you? Am I reading that right?
Yeah, so well, maybe not personally. Certainly, her office has involvement in the recent iteration of that. Now, I've been persecuted for many years. They've been coming after my family for many years, really trying to bankrupt me through the courts. And it's lawfare, because when they can't get you criminally. Now, this is where, something like January 6th, those were criminal prosecutions, right? And then they went after people, and Dr. Simone Gold, for example, got sort of tied into that, and was persecuted through the criminal system. They have nothing on me going through the criminal system. They would have to literally make up something wholesale. So they're going after me through the civil system, civil court system, with various fraudulent court applications and so on. That goes back to my lawsuit, which I filed for the sabotage of my cancer program. This was before the COVID-19 pandemic. What they've done is they've continued to commit fraud over and over in the courts, trying to wrap up court penalties to then try to threaten me that if I don't pay these various court penalties that they've made up and that the judges have made up, that they're going to throw me in prison. And the most recent one, there was a $10,000 penalty that they had made up because I had communications with Premier Danielle Smith's office. These were email communications, these were private communications. They were leaked to the lawyers of this health authority, who then ran to court, had a judge seal them, immediately seal the communications, and then hit me with the penalty. I didn't pay it. I don't pay extortion penalties. And they said, okay, well, if Dr. Makis doesn't pay the penalty, we're going to throw him in prison for 83 days. And it seems that I was shocked to find a lot of the documents that had been leaked from the premier's office in those sworn affidavits, where this health authority, that's, again, it's one of these bureaucracies that are sort of operating almost as its own sort of government in Alberta, because they consume almost half the provincial budget, $26 billion a year, that they had documents from the premier's office that they are using to threaten me, to throw me in prison. So someone at the premier's office has leaked the documents to those corrupt lawyers. And at some point, I might put those documents out publicly. But the problem with Premier Danielle Smith is that she talked a big game to get in, and she's done very, very little once she got in. And there's a lot of, I think, advisors around her, wealthy advisors who represent big, powerful financial interess, who are perfectly comfortable with the corruption in the healthcare system, and really the bureaucratic mafia that really runs large parts of the province. And she's bent the knee, and she's backed off of all her promises. And I think people have been just shocked, but they're so afraid of the other side, because the other side, who are the leftists, who are the equivalent of the Democrats in the States, I mean, they are so radically leftist that everyone is so afraid to just hang on to the status quo, because the other side talked about going door to door and force injecting people who are not COVID vaccinated. I mean, former Premier Rachel Notley was campaigning on going door to door. She said, we're going to find out who's unvaccinated and we're going to vaccinate you. Talking about forced injections, of the COVID-19 vaccines. That's what they ran on. And so the Albertan population is petrified that these lunatics on the left might actually get into power, and ruin basically what's left of the province. But it's Premier Danielle Smith has been just seems to have been completely paralyzed by this bureaucratic class, which is leftist in every way. And she hasn't, again, it's the same situation, right? She's come in, she's run up against this bureaucracy, and she's done nothing to fire any of the top people that are sitting in our healthcare system, telling us that, yeah, we're going to lock you down the next time a pandemic comes. We're going to keep force injecting babies as young as 6 months old with COVID-19 vaccines. We're going to keep covering up vaccine injuries and deaths. There's no such thing. It's not happening. And we're going to continue abusing doctors and nurses who are standing up for medical ethics and the Hippocratic Oath and for informed consent, which we no longer have in Alberta. So she seems like she's completely powerless to do anything about any of this.
And people in Canada just take the approach of what's the lesser of two evils.
Exactly. They are, I think they're paralyzed with fear. Like here in Alberta, in the conservative provinces, people are paralyzed with fear. They're afraid that if a leftist provincial government gets in, then it's game over, right? Then we'll lose whatever little, freedoms we have left, and that things will take a very sort of a radical left turn. And that fear is paralyzing. It sort of, you know, makes you, yeah, exactly. It's you end up sort of backing the lesser of two evils, or you just end up backing the status quo, which is not good. It's we have corrupt people in very powerful positions. Like I said, who would love nothing better to lock us down and to, declare another pandemic of any kind and bring new products in. It's again, the pharmaceutical industry, right, has tremendous power in Canada as well. It's not just the United States. They've got a complete grip on Canada also.
Do you think it's in the hands of the people now in Canada if they really want to make change? And I'm not saying like civil war or calling for violence or anything, but just even in my opinion, because you have to say that every time now, you can't build this thing from the top to the bottom. It has to start locally within your own community, within your own the lens that you look through every single day. And I still think that's true in the United States. We'll see what happens with this new administration. They're not in yet either. So I mean, also there's like we talked
Right.
about earlier, a lot can happen between now and then. I mean, I
Yep.
think he'll get in, but what's the state of the world? What's the state of the country and the world going to be by January 20th? But in Canada, I mean, it sounds to me you have to start within local and build
Well,
up.
there's efforts to do that. There's efforts to put, good, honest people on city councils and on sort of the school boards. There's efforts to do that, but it's hard to do on a larger scale. You can do it in small towns. So I think we have a small town in Alberta, for example, that banned the rainbow flag. They banned pride parades. Uh, it's a tiny town, right? You could do that could do it on a small scale. You can do it in very small places, small towns. Certainly, I think people can organize to take control locally of whether it's the education, whether it's even on a municipal level. I haven't seen any sort of ability to do that on any larger scale. I think the closest we've seen was sort of the effort to turn British Columbia, which is a very leftist province politically, to turn it into a conservative province, and they came close, and it was a 50-50 the recent election in British Columbia, and I think the left ended up stealing just enough of the votes to stay in power, but it's very hard to do on a larger scale, and I think things are not dire. Things are not dire enough economically for people to really organize in larger numbers. I mean, we saw the trucker protest, right, in Ottawa and in parts of Alberta, and which was very successful, and yet you saw the crackdown on that. The Trudeau government, cracked down, declared an emergency, started going after people's bank accounts. The media just crucified the trucker protest with all kinds of fake stories of racism and white nationalism and all this kind of garbage that the media does, right? And so you had the whole propaganda machine, and now everyone looks at the trucker protest. 2 years later, everyone's afraid to even talk about it. You've got some of the sort of leading figures in the trucker protest, like Tamara Leach and Chris Barber and so on, are still being threatened with 10-year prison sentences, are still being prosecuted in the courts. People are afraid. They're afraid, and I don't think they have the ability to organize in any substantial way to bring about substantial change. Like I said, you could do it maybe in small towns, but I don't think we're at a point where, yes, it should come from the bottom up. I just don't see it happening, not in Canada.
So, what do you think will be the end result then, or the breaking point in Canada?
I think it's going to have to be economic pain, because we've seen such a dramatic cultural shift in the last 10 years towards this sort of far left extremist ideas. It's being pushed in schools, and there's I mean, this literal attack on Christianity, for example. Like I said, we've had, over 100 churches burned down to the ground, and virtually nobody prosecuted for it. No one's even investigating. Um, we have, you know, I still know of cases of Christians who were kicked out of school, or who lost their degree because they don't want to call someone by, their pronouns, or they don't want to say a man is a woman, or whatever it is, right? I mean, that's still happening. People are being persecuted for these things, right? There's been such a dramatic cultural shift, and yet people haven't pushed back. People have just sort of begrudgingly accepted it, right? You go to your local pharmacy and you're faced with a gigantic rainbow trans flag at the entrance, and people just sort of accept this as normal, right? There's this cult that's being shoved down our throats, and people haven't really pushed back at all. Canadians have accepted this dramatic cultural shift towards these sort of radical left cultist ideas. I think it's going to have to be economic pain. I can't see anything else. And we haven't had really enough economic pain for Canadians, I think, to wake up.
So, in your own situation, I know I'm running out of time here with you, but you know, these court systems, they're trying to financially break you, and that's what they do,
It's
right?
it's
Take you
it's
out to deep water.
That's all it is. That's all it is. And what they've done is, the judges who are involved actually spent several years coordinating the various different applications, uh, so that they could pile up the court costs in a sort of a single attack, right? And so it was funny. This one judge actually booked a couple of court dates within days of each other, and then the decisions came within days of each other, just so that they could pile up this attack and threaten my family with it. And it was $10,000 here, $20,000 there, and whatever. Eventually, it adds up to something like $80,000, and they thought that would be sufficient to break me, because again, Canadian courts usually don't award court costs. You get a couple of $1,000 here, a couple of $1,000 there, but they've been sort of trying to coordinate it so that they could rack up as much of these court fees as possible, and basically extort my family and threaten my family with it. And of course, now they say, well, if you don't pay, we'll throw you in jail, right? So, but like I said, I'm going to expose this publicly. The fact that documents leaked from Alberta Premier Danielle Smith's office, confidential documents that I exchanged with her office, leaked to these corrupt lawyers that they're threatening my family with imprisonment now. I'm going to expose all of that. I'm going to be doing videos. I'm going to be exposing letters, documents, and I'm going to put pressure on Danielle Smith. And when they abuse people like me and my family, and they abuse the doctors, they expect you to break. They expect you to break mentally, and they have the media behind it, because the media will blacklist you. They will never carry your story. You will never get interviewed. Your social media accounts, might be shut down, not on X anymore, but in other places. And so you basically disappear. If you're a dissident, if you're someone speaking out against, whether it's the COVID narratives or whatever it is, the system breaks you, right? Their attempt is to break you mentally and financially, and to make you disappear like you never existed. But I have a massive following now. I have, 320,000 followers on Twitter, or X. I have the largest social media following of any doctor in Canada. and yet they've pretended for years that I don't exist. Premier Danielle Smith won't even say my name when she's confronted at town halls by people saying, "Why don't you sit down with Dr. Makis? Why don't you, restore Dr. Makis to, or why don't you answer some of Dr. Makis's allegations?" She doesn't have the guts to even say my name. I've been blacklisted for years and years by the establishment, by the swamp here in Alberta, because they've just tried to break me, and they've tried to get me to sign non-disclosure agreements and make me go away. I had a this long non-disclosure agreement put in front of me that I will never talk about what I've witnessed happening in the healthcare system, the sabotage of my cancer program, the fact that they murdered my cancer patients. I am to never speak of that ever again. They're holding my license hostage in exchange for me signing that non-disclosure agreement. And this whole attempt to put financial pressure on me through the courts is to get me to sign non-disclosure agreement and make me go away. Because that's usually what they do is they make dissident doctors go away, right? And I'm able to bring this to a wider audience to show what's happening, how corrupt the courts are, how corrupt even the political class, the media, the fact that the only stories that are run about me is that, oh, he's some anti-vaxxer who's lost some court things, right? That's the only media story that gets run about me. Meanwhile, I've had probably more vaccines than 99% of people in Alberta throughout my medical career, right? But I'm an anti-vaxxer who's, the media tries to portray me as some kind of a fringe person, right? It's unfortunate, but I would have loved to have seen. You see, like President Donald Trump, he embraced RFK Jr. They sort of had this collaborative effort, and President Trump still doesn't address the issue of the vaccine injuries and deaths and so on. He still praises Operation Warp Speed, but he brought in RFK Jr., who's been very critical of and not just the COVID-19 vaccines, but some of the other vaccines that have caused harm as well, right? And there's this collaborative approach in the United States. You don't see anything like that in Canada. The conservative politicians will not utter the word vaccine. They will not speak about the excess deaths. They will not speak about the COVID vaccine injuries, the sudden and unexplained deaths. They won't touch the topic. They're petrified. They're petrified of what the media will do to them and what, of course, the bureaucracy that's actually in charge will do to them. So you don't see it in Canada. This sort of I think what President Donald Trump is doing, he's sort of indirectly bringing in the topics. Like you said, he's opening up the Overton window. Now we're actually discussing things that would have been considered unthinkable to discuss even a few years ago. RFK Jr. talks about obviously looking at the entire vaccine schedule, having proper studies done or safety established on these products. All of this was unthinkable, or was considered fringe even a couple of years ago. So we need something. We need something in Canada to happen. And I thought Premier Danielle Smith would be the person to lead the charge, and she's clearly not.
And for you, it's they're coming after you because of hydroxychloroquine, ivermectin.
Well, that gets thrown on a part. That's part of it. That's part of it. I'm also, using ivermectin for cancer as well, and so that's a whole new area that I've opened up in the last year or 2 years. And the lawyers will throw that into their letters. Oh, Dr. Makis is talking about this and that, whatever. They'll throw that in, but I think they've been mostly trying to silence me because I've been exposing the corruption in the healthcare system here for years now, and even in the years prior to the pandemic. But certainly, their position is that I'm also, you know, espousing anti-vaccination views and whatever kind of nonsense. They mentioned that in their letters to me as well. So uh, I mean, there's an effort to silence me and get rid of me, and I'm sure that, the fact that I talk about the vaccines the vaccine injuries, the fact that children are dying from the vaccines or are being injured. I was told that the Daniel Smith's team wasn't happy about that either. We had a presentation a few months ago that was sponsored by the political party, by Daniel Smith's party. It was sponsored by Daniel Smith's party, and they invited, Dr. Jessica Rose, Dr. Byron Bridle, Dr. Mark Trozy, Dr. Chris Shoemaker, myself, to talk about, the childhood vaccine schedule and the COVID vaccines on the childhood vaccine schedule. We all said that the vaccines should be immediately taken off the childhood vaccine schedule. And Premier Smith's team apparently wasn't happy about that and how that went, and how that event went, and the fact that we were talking about these vaccines have to be taken off the market because they're harming people. People are dying. There's too many sudden deaths. There's too much, there's cancers, there's autoimmune diseases, neurological diseases. They just, they don't want to face it. They don't want to do anything about it.
So what's the next step for you? But before you answer that, what if the next administration, Trump administration, does come calling on you? And has there been anything, rumors about that?
So I know that my CV has been forwarded. For example, Senator Ron Johnson's office, forwarded my CV to RFK Jr.'s team at the HHS. There's been other people who've been advocating for me as well. I think if I was offered, a position, to work with RFK Jr. in some significant capacity, I would definitely take it. I think it's a unique opportunity, and this is not just to take a job. I'm not interested in jobs. I'm interested in change. I wouldn't take a position to have a job. I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in actually affecting change. So, for example, if I could help make ivermectin over the counter available to everyone in the United States at a cheap cost, you want to use drugs like ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, mebendazole, fenbendazole. Every American should have access over the counter. Period. No prescription necessary. I mean, these are the safeties established for decades. In these medications, they're amazing, not just for parasitic infections, but as antivirals. In the case of ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, there's tremendous research now showing efficacy in cancer for ivermectin and mebendazole or fenbendazole. And so that would be something that I'll be interested in. That is not possible in Canada, and it wouldn't have been possible in the United States under previous administrations because you've got big pharma, and I have hundreds of cancer patients coming to me, just completely exhausted from this big pharma treadmill that they get put on once they get diagnosed with cancer. And it's just they face nothing but big pharma protocols, chemo, immunotherapy. It's whatever's approved by big pharma. That is the only option they're offered. And you have this, this idea that these big cancer centers in the United States, MD Anderson, Memorial Sloan Kettering, Dana-Farber, Harvard Cancer Center, all these big cancer centers, we look at them as well, these are cutting edge, these are the best in the world. No, they're not. They're some of the worst in the world. They give you a cookie cutter approach. There's no personalized approach to cancer care. You get bombarded with chemo after chemo after chemo, and it had to be approved by big pharma. That's it. That's the only offer you get. And if you don't respond to those chemo treatments, you get sent home to die. That's it. That's all you're offered from the biggest, the fanciest cancer centers in the United States. You get nothing. You get no creativity. You get no personalized treatment. You have no alternative approaches of any kind. The doctors don't even want to talk about it. And most of the oncologists had to take at least 2, 3 COVID-19 vaccines just to keep their job, right? So most of them are suffering the effects, the health effects of the vaccines themselves, having made the bad decision to take the vaccines in the first place, which no doctor should have taken. If they had 2 functioning brain cells, they could have looked at the vaccine and said, wait a minute, this is completely experimental technology that has never worked. In medicine, you do not take experimental treatments if you're a healthy person. You just don't. There's no indication. There's never been any indication in medicine to take experimental products that have just been approved or that have just been brought to market, to take an experimental product for any reason if you're a healthy person, if you don't have a particular condition that you're dealing with. That's never happened in history. And yet doctors were lining up by the tens of thousands to be injected with contaminated, what we now know were contaminated mRNA vaccines. That was all harm and no benefit. And so, you look at cancer care in the United States, I would love to be able to bring some drastic changes or some new ideas, give people access to some of these things that they don't have access to. I would love to work with the new administration on something like that. And I would do it to bring about change, not to take a job.
Yeah, I've got Christina Parks coming on tomorrow, if you're familiar with her, out of Michigan, to talk about with Kevin McKernan, the information that he's putting out right now. And unbelievable where we're at today.
Exactly. And the thing is, you look at someone like Kevin McKernan, right? A brilliant scientist. He's doing all of this really mostly on his own. I don't think he has a lot of financial support to do some of this work. He's doing the work, he's getting it published, it's being confirmed by other scientists all around the world. Let's say, the contamination of the the DNA contamination of the mRNA vaccines. Uh, where's the large institutions on this? Where's Stanford? Where's Harvard? Where are all these amazing scientific institutions that have billions of dollars of NIH funding? Uh, where are they? Where are all these, big universities that have all these research departments? They're nowhere to be found. They're basically uh, pushing propaganda and pushing contaminated products from the pharmaceutical industry and then keeping their mouth shut, right? This research work should be done by these big NIH funded, institutions with big grants and so on. Like this kind of work, Kevin McKernan shouldn't be doing this on a shoestring budget on his own, right? There should be teams of scientists doing this kind of work. And yet it takes a couple of brilliant, hardworking people really working independently on their own to do this kind of groundbreaking work that Kevin McKernan is doing. With the vaccines, you've got Dr. David Speaker in Canada. I know you've got scientists in Germany who've confirmed, the DNA contamination in Japan as well. But it's all being done by independent scientists who are actual true scientists, who are ethical and, who've got sort of the creativity to do this kind of work. Where's the big institutions on any of this, right? I mean, we have such corruption in science and medicine. They're not doing the work that they should be doing. Kevin McKernan's work, and they should be seeing, okay, is there any truth to this? Let's test 1,000 vials. Let's test 10,000 vials. They have the money. They have, they have the personnel. They have all the funding in the world. Where's all these billions of dollars of scientific funding going, right? They won't but they won't do it because it puts the pharmaceutical industry in a bad light. It threatens a product that has made hundreds of billions of dollars in profit, right, for Pfizer shareholders and Moderna shareholders. And so we need a complete reset in science and medicine. And I think, I'm sure Kevin McKernan is of a similar mindset. It shouldn't be left to a couple of individuals like ourselves to push the boundaries of cutting edge research. Even the work I'm doing, the ivermectin work that I'm doing with cancer patients, no one else is doing it in North America. Dr. Kathleen Ruddy, I think, is the only other doctor who's worked with ivermectin in cancer patients. And Epoch Times, did an interview with her.
I
But
had her
that's
on.
it.
I had her on here.
Yeah,
She was on my show a
exactly.
while
And
back.
exactly. And but no one else is doing it. No one else is even contemplating it. And yet we are seeing dramatic results in patients who are failing chemo, in patients who are being sent home to die, where the medical establishment tells them, we have no other options for you. Well, no, there are options. You're just not allowed to talk about them. You're not allowed to offer them because, you're beholden to the pharmaceutical industry and you have to push certain profitable products. There's no profit in treating patients with ivermectin. You can get ivermectin from India for 10, 20 cents a pill if you buy it in bulk, right? In the States, okay, maybe you're paying $1 or $2 a pill. That's not profit for the pharmaceutical industry. The pharmaceutical industry has to make hundreds of thousands of dollars per cancer patient. That's what their goal is. That's what their goal is with the mRNA cancer vaccines. They've even come out and said, yeah, these mRNA cancer vaccines, when we put them out, they're going to cost $500,000 per treatment. That's all it is. It's money, and we need a reset. That's why we need a complete reset in medicine and science. And if RFK Jr. and his team can do that, I would love to be a part of that.
Last question. In your research with ivermectin, is there any certain types of cancer where it's more impactful?
Yes. So there's a fascinating study that was done in Mexico. And again, you'd think, well, why wasn't a study like that done in the United States? Why does it have to be a group of creative researchers in Mexico that did this unique study? So what they did was they took all the cancer cell lines that they had available to them, and I think there was 28 different cancer cell lines, and they tested ivermectin on them and see how the cancer cells responded to ivermectin. And virtually all of the cancers responded to ivermectin, but they responded to different degrees. So some cancers responded better, some, not so much. And I believe the one actually that responded the best was ovarian cancer, which is fascinating because ovarian cancer is actually very difficult to treat. And then the next best was breast cancer, various breast cancer cell lines. And again, breast cancer is the most common cancer in women. Uh, these are significant findings. But again, you see pancreatic cancer responding to ivermectin. You see colon cancer responding to ivermectin. This is a big deal because some of these cancers have a very low response rate to chemo. And some of the new immunotherapies, the response rate is a little bit better, but you're talking about, hundreds of thousands of dollars of treatment versus a couple of dollars of treatment, right? I mean, an entire treatment course of ivermectin over a year might set you back maybe a few hundred dollars, maybe $1,000. The pharmaceutical industry looks at that and laughs. They're like, who's going to get rich off this? Our shareholders are not going to get rich off this, right? And yet, this is something that should be available to every American. How come it is possible to fly down to Mexico, go to an airport, and just grab as much ivermectin as you want off the shelf? And you come back to the United States, and if a doctor even thinks about prescribing ivermectin, they'll be stripped of their certification, like Dr. Pierre Corey and Dr. Paul Merrick. They'll be hunted by the authorities, by the medical authorities for years. They might have their license suspended. They might lose their job. If it was, during a different time, they would have been suspended off social media from X under the old management. How's that possible that you can get something over the counter in Mexico, and that's perfectly fine, but you try to get it in the United States, and your doctor's hounded worse than any criminal would be, hounded or chased. So it's just totally upside down. Everything is driven by money and big pharma. If we can change that and make some of these things available to Americans, I mean, Americans should have access to this. I mean, you've got better healthcare in some of these, third world countries than in the United States. That just makes absolutely no sense to me.
What about prostate? Ivermectin, good for any results on
Yes.
prostate?
Yeah. I have patients it's very interesting because most of my cancer patients right now are stage 4 cancer patients who've exhausted a lot of their options in the conventional medical establishment. Chemo's not working. Doctors like, well, we've got nothing else to offer you. That's the majority of my patients. Now, I do have another group of patients who are coming to me. They've got prostate cancer. It's in the early stages. It hasn't spread yet. The PSA is going up, and they're being offered two choices: radical prostatectomy or radiation that might leave you with, consequences for the rest of your life. So they're basically being offered two bad choices, right? Both of which are sort of invasive and radical. They're not being offered anything else. And yet these cases will respond to ivermectin with no side effects. The PSA goes down, and I'm just working to find out how long it takes for these prostate lesions to disappear completely. That's sort of in the works right now. I'm doing a lot of follow-ups, but I've got cases where the PSA, which is a prostate antigen that we measure as a marker of the prostate cancer, their PSA might have been rising for years and years and years. 2, 3 years, let's say the PSA has been rising, and the doctors are like pushing, okay, let's do surgery, let's do radiation, let's get this thing done. They start taking ivermectin, their PSA starts going down for the first time in years. And we know that it's a marker of cancer cell killing, that these cancer lesions are being killed off by ivermectin. A very simple approach. There's not an oncologist in the United States who will do it. Like I said, other than Dr. Reddy, perhaps. But you've got thousands and thousands of oncologists who won't even mention the word ivermectin as a possibility to their patients, for example, right? So this has to change. Medicine cannot be profit driven. That's not ethical medicine. That's not ethical practice of medicine. And right now, especially oncology is purely profit driven, big pharma driven. The oncologists get guidelines from these big medical associations like the American Cancer Society and so on, who get all their funding from big pharma. So the only things that will end up in the guidelines are what makes money for big pharma, not what's good for the patient, right? That has to change. And if I get a chance to do that, I would love to do that on RFK Jr.'s team.
Where can people find you, doctor?
People can find me on Twitter at MakisMD, on Substack, makismd.substack.com, and on Instagram, WMakisMD.
So you're still using your Instagram?
I am, but I've never used the word vaccine or COVID-19 for that matter. I just post photographs, and so that's how I've been able to. I think Instagram doesn't have AI software powerful enough to analyze photographs and the fact that I'm posting, died suddenly cases. So I've managed to keep my Instagram account alive that way.
Yeah, I'm still debating if I should put our conversation on YouTube. Should we do it and see how long it survives?
You know what? Do it and let me know, and actually time it and see. But you might get a strike or whatever it is, right? Against your account. So it's a risk you're taking, but if you do, let me know.
It's part of the fun of it, isn't it, though, just to see?
I think something like this, I think it's still, YouTube, Facebook, I think it's still going to get removed very quickly. But, I'd love to see.
I mean, this would be a really good test for me this week because I had Martin Koldorf on earlier, and then, I have Dr. Christina Parks coming on tomorrow to talk about Kevin McKernan's work. So if I could get through this week, I mean, maybe I'm home free with YouTube.
Maybe. Let's give it a shot.
Doctor, thank you so much for coming back on. It was great to meet you in person. I look forward to more conversations ahead and continuing to follow your work.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you having me on.
Mic drop.